when you're light-making, which is what I call working for a good cause and seeing each other to joy. What that means is getting very, very clear on what it is that you're going to be motivated around, right? What is the thing you're going to be activated for? And so when I spoke to activists, repeatedly, a couple of them said that the way you figure out what are you going to be activated around, if activism is something you want to get into, is you either have to listen to the bang or the whisper, is the way they said. And so to give you an idea, the difference between a bang or a whisper, some people get into activism because something really catastrophic has happened, something huge has happened, and they're sort of catapulted into it. And the analogy I like to use there is a woman who I met, who she had a premature baby, and her baby was in the NICU, and she found during those times when she was really touch and go with her child, that she felt very, very lonely, right? That the doctors and the nurses, although very professional and wonderful, were very professional and wonderful, and really couldn't connect with her on the emotions that she was feeling. And nor could her friends, right? Like anybody who wasn't going through what she was going through. And so her baby's fine, I think her baby's now in college, everything is fine. But she decided to start an organization of volunteers of people who had been through that sort of trauma of having a premature child and watching your child in the NICU. And those volunteers would go into NICUs to be with parents that were currently going through it because they knew what was helpful and what they could say. So that's sort of a bang, right? Something really, really big and scary happened to her, and she decided that she was going to get into activism. The whisper, on the other hand, is when you look at something and you're like, man, that doesn't seem right. Somebody should do something about that. I want to be different than that, right? And the analogy I use is a great guy. His name is Ron Finley. He has a fantastic TED Talk. He calls himself a guerrilla gardener, G-U-E-R-R, guerrilla gardener. He's from South Central LA. And nothing catastrophic happened to him, but he was noticing in his neighborhood that nobody can have access to fresh food, right? He was living in a food desert. And so he said all that people were getting were processed foods at bodegas or whatever else. And dialysis centers were popping up like Starbucks, is the way he says it, right? And so he was like, this is ridiculous. Somebody should do something about this. And he noticed that there were all of these abandoned lots in LA that the city owned, but nothing was happening. So he would just take them over and start gardens, food gardens. And anybody in the community could come get fresh food. And he got arrested a few times, and he was like, you're not using it, why do you care, right? And did that. So that's a whisper, right? That's something that's like, something's not quite right. So that's the thing that you have to get really clear on. And the beauty of doing that is when you do get very clear on what it is you're going to be activated around, you start to feel and get closer in touch with what your mission in life is going to be. What Japanese call the ikigai. And the definition of ikigai is a motivating force, something that gives you a sense of purpose or reason for living, right? And the beauty of this, I have found, is that there's these areas of the world that are called blue zones. Has anybody heard of those? Yeah. All right. Blue zones are places around the world. There's one in Greece, there's one in Costa Rica, there's one in California, where there's an inordinate number of people who live past 100 and live well past 100. And there are things that they all hold in common, but one of the things that they hold in common is that all of them in these communities tend to have this really motivating sense of purpose, of what it is that they're here on the planet for, right? Why it's important to be here. One of the things that I like to share, a story that I love to share, I wasn't planning on sharing it, but I will share it today. Back when a few years ago, I was doing a talk at a university, Stephen F. Austin University in Texas, and I was the closing keynote, I think, and the lunchtime keynote was a man by the name of Arun Gandhi. You all recognize the last name at all, right? He was the grandson of the Mahatma Gandhi. And I remember the morning before the conference, I was checking out of my hotel, and I saw him sitting in the lobby. I recognized him from the marketing. And I kind of smiled, and he must have recognized me from the marketing of the conference, and he did this. You may join me. And since I have a rule that if any Gandhi invites me to join them, I can do that, I went and I sat with him. And, I asked him all these questions that I'm sure he gets all the time that he's tired of, like, well, what's the Mahatma really like? And, really silly things. And he was lovely and very gracious. And one of the things he told me during that conversation was this idea of trusteeship. And so his story is really interesting. So Arun Gandhi grew up in apartheid South Africa. And when he was a kid, he was always getting in fights because, like, all the black kids knew he wasn't black, so they were fighting him. And all the white kids knew he certainly wasn't white, so they were fighting him. And this was all during the time that the Mahatma Gandhi was coming to prominence in India. And so his parents were like, we can't with you. We're tired of this fighting. We're going to send you to your grandfather to live for a while. And would that we all could send our recalcitrant troops to Grandpa Gandhi when they start to act up. But that's what happened. And the Mahatma taught him about this theory of trusteeship. And he says, we all have these gifts and these talents, right? Each one of us has a gift and a talent. And we tend to get our egos tied up in them, right? We either think that we're totally hot because we have this amazing gift, or we don't like to talk about it at all because we don't want people to think that we're being egotistical because we have this gift. And what the Mahatma said, and what Mr. Gandhi said to the kids in the room that day, was that we have it all wrong. Those are gifts that are given to us by God, Allah, the universe, whatever you believe, and they're given to us in trusteeship. That we're just supposed to hold them and use them to help make the world better. That's why we have them. And when you think of it that way, your ego starts to get out of it, and you're like, oh, this is actually a responsibility I have, right? This is something I can do. And your ikigai can really be helpful in going, okay, this is my mission, and these are the things that I really, really love to do, and this is how I can do this. So I always encourage people to really think about what is the thing that's sort of igniting your passion, right? Whether or not passion, remember, can be two things. It can be love or anger, right? So what are the things in the world that are making you angry that you want to do something about? Or what are the things that you love that you want to protect? And when I tell people to do this, I'm a huge journaler. Like, keep a journal on you, keep a pad of paper on you, and when you notice those feelings coming up, like, make a note of them. And because that will lead you to sort of your ikigai, your purpose for living. Okay? Make sense? Still with me? Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to tell you I did this, and I'm going to share sort of my ikigai, right, that I've put some words around, right? So my ikigai is I fight the darkness of negativity, violence, and discrimination, and convince the skeptical of their uncommon light, and just demonstrate that kindness is a power move. Like, everything that I do, I want it to be around these things, right? And what I really love sort of about my ikigai is because it's broad enough that I can play in it, right? I can see what is it that's really getting to me, and how am I going to do that and convince people, no, you have the power to make the world better. And the things that I love to do, like writing books and photography, how can I use those gifts in order to convince people of this? And this actually led me to my second book, right? So now we're a few years later, it's 2022, so there's my camper husband and my amazing daughter, and I am turning 55 in 2022. Yes, thank you. I'll take that. I received that. Thank you. In 2022, my marriage was turning 20, right? And our daughter was turning 18. She was graduating high school and going off to college. Our only child. And when I was telling people about this, I was very excited about all of these things, but I noticed that most people were just excited about one thing, the 20-year marriage, right? Everybody's like, oh, 55. Double nickels. How you doing? Right? There was a lot of that. Or they would be like, oh, wow, your daughter's 18. God, empty nest. Fly in the coop. How you doing, mama? Which really confounded me because I don't know about y'all that have kids, but getting 18 and out of the house was kind of the goal. And I have a great kid. Like, my kid is amazing, right? She's actually, by the way, she's an hour and a half, or no, maybe even 45 minutes here. She's in CU Boulder. But, there we go, a couple of golden people. So, yeah, like, I was really sort of confounded by this idea that why would people be sad about any of those things? Like, for me, they were all amazing. And not only that, when I looked around to people who were my age, they were like all doing amazing things. They were writing New York Times bestsellers, or one friend of mine was writing a Broadway play for the first time, and like all of this really cool stuff was happening. And so I was like, what is that? Like, why does everybody hate getting older when it feels kind of amazing to me, right? Thank you. So I'm thinking about this, and then I started getting really heartbroken about it, because like, especially, by the way, young people younger than me, people who were 29 turning 30, or 39 turning 40, that were just bereft about the fact they were changing. And I was like, this doesn't feel right. Like, why are people so sad about the idea of their continued existence? Right? Like, somebody should write a book about that. Maybe I should write a book about that. Right? That was the whisper. And so, that's what the book was. That's what the next book was that I wrote. It was called Radiant Rebellion, Reclaim Aging, Practice Joy, and Raise a Little Help. And what I will tell you about this is that as I was doing this book, I really got into this book thinking, I am so enlightened. Right? I know all about aging, it's awesome. And I'll just write a book that makes people feel fine about being aging, right? What I didn't realize was what a big problem ageism is. Like, it's freaking huge. It's really, really huge. And as a matter of fact, it's so huge that WHO, the World Health Organization, did a study in 2021 and found that 1 in 2 people around the world, not just in America, around the world, hold ageist assumptions, right? And the ageist assumptions end up causing health issues. They end up costing economies billions, and they called it a scourge around the planet. And they said, this is a quote from them. Ooh, hang on. There we go. We need to fight ageism head on as a deep-rooted human rights violation. Ain't that something? Right? So this is like, okay, this is really, really a problem, right? So I started really getting into it, this lawyer, like to love evidence. And I thought, oh, did we always hate aging? Like, has everybody always had a problem with aging? All right, y'all strap in, because you're about to tell you some stuff that will blow your mind, all right? The truth is we did not always hate aging. And by the way, one bit of data that I did not tell you in the previous slide, they say that if you have a positive outlook in aging, you can extend your life up to 7 years. That if you have a negative outlook in aging, you can shorten your life up to 7 years, all right? So we should, like, have a positive outlook. So here's the thing, we didn't always hate aging. This is great, all right, strap in. I came across the research of a woman by the name of Dr. Laura Hirschbein. She is a psychiatrist and a medical historian, okay? And she wanted to know, did we always hate aging? So what she decided to do is research how people talked about aging between 1900 and 1950. And the way she did that is she thought, I'll look up what popular magazines, what articles in popular magazines in those times said about aging, because she figured that would sort of capture the zeitgeist, right? How people were doing. And in 1900, the authors and people who were writing about aging tended to be in their later years, 80, 90 years old. And they tended to be very pro-aging. It was like, aging is amazing. I love being wiser. I love the accumulated experience that I have. Yeah, okay, I've got backache and I've got some aches and pains, but they pale in comparison to the amazing stuff that age has given me. Right? Sounds great. So everybody loved aging back then. Fast forward, 2 world wars and a Great Depression, okay? And what's happening is the government realizes that all of these 70, 80, 90-year-olds who are still working, right, are potentially keeping jobs away from the young 30-year-old men, primarily, right, who have young families, and they need to take care of their families. So the government, in their wisdom, decides, you know what, we need a mandatory retirement age. So we're going to set it to 65. If you're 65, you've got to get out of the workforce so that these younger people can get jobs. All right? Totally rational decision at that point. However, the consequences, right? So now, all of these people who are older are now no longer contributing to society, right? They're not contributing to the economy. So then doctors, primarily pediatricians, decide, you know what? We should start researching on what happens to people when they get older. Gerontology didn't exist then. And the people who started it tended to be pediatricians. You ready? Or pediatric psychologists and psychiatrists. And they use the standard of normal as 5-year-olds. So if you weren't as nimble as a 5-year-old, you were impaired. If you weren't as quick-minded as a 5-year-old, you are impaired. And they started writing the articles, right? So now aging has become a problem to be fixed, right? Right? Because you're clearly impaired. Enter Clairol. You don't want people thinking that you are impaired. And the best way to do that is to dye your hair, right? So now hair dyeing becomes a really big thing, and thus the anti-aging industry is born to the tune of trillions of dollars a year unregulated. Ain't that something? In 50 years. That's from 1900 to 1950. All right? So we went from loving it to now aging is a problem. Okay? Isn't that crazy? Am I the only person who thinks that's crazy? Oh, quiet. Are you dumbstruck? Right? Like it's bananas, okay? So that was really interesting to me that, oh, okay, capitalism is the reason we hate aging, right? So if we are all steeped in it, how do we unsteep ourselves in it, right? How do we fight ageism, right? And the way that we do that is that we fight ageism by reckoning with our own perceptions of our own aging. All right? That's how we have to start doing it. And the reason, by the way, and I want to be very, very clear about this, right? Ageism cuts both ways. It ain't only about getting older, right? Ageism is discriminating against anybody based on their age, whether they're older or younger. So it cuts both ways. So remember, I went into this thinking, I'm so enlightened, I'm going to write this book, right? I'm going to interview people. And one of the people I interviewed was a woman by the name of Ashton Applewhite. She is amazing. She's an anti-ageism activist. She has a great TED Talk. Look her up. And I interviewed her, and I was like, so tell me, Ashton, for the masses who don't get aging as well as I do, tell me, what are some of the mistakes that you hear people use, that you hear people say or you hear people do about aging? And she said one of the biggest ways to become conscious is to think about how you use the words old and young. And I said, I don't understand, what do you mean? And she said, well, like for example, I hear people say all the time, I don't feel old. And I was like, yeah, I say that all the time. I don't feel old. Why is that a problem? And she said, well, Karen, when you say I don't feel old, I suspect what you're saying is I don't feel invisible, or I don't feel unsexy, or I don't feel irrelevant. Is that about right? And I said, yeah. She said, well, I don't know about you, but I had bouts of feeling unsexy, invisible, and irrelevant when I was 13. Those aren't age-related terms, right? And she's like, we use old as shorthand for bad and young as shorthand for good all the time, and we don't even realize we're doing it, right? And by the way, the same thing happens on the other things. You see somebody younger come into the conference room and you think like, oh, this person ain't gonna know a damn thing, right? Right? Or you think these children don't know anything, and I'm sure as educators you all know, and you have all had children that have lived lives that were way more complicated than you ever did in your grown up, right? So we have to be really, really, really careful about how we use these things, old and young. By the way, I just love this picture. I just stuck it in here because I love this picture. That's my daughter when she was 2.5, 3, and that's my grandmother when she was 99. So, isn't that amazing? She lived to 102. So anyway, so really start thinking about this. And the reason that I want us to start thinking about this and why I think it's relevant to bring up here is because now, more than ever, as you guys go out in the world facing all kinds of weird pressures that you probably didn't have to deal with 20 years ago, and certainly the people who came before you didn't have to, weird things about what you're allowed to teach in schools and what people think, and having to be trained on how to keep your kids physically safe in schools, all the things that you have to deal with, now more than ever, we need each other. And we cannot let something like ageism keep us from coming together. Does that make sense? You know, because the truth is that those of us who are veterans, we bring experience and tradition and all that that brings to the table. And those of us who are younger bring sort of the cultural zeitgeist of what is happening in the world with them. And it's only by using those two things together that we're going to have creativity and innovation and evolution. That's how it works. Yeah? Okay. Y'all still with me out here? All right. Okay, so we've talked about We've talked about how to work for change without losing your health. We've talked about anti-ageism. The thing for me, as I wrote these two books, which are two very different books, but they have one thing really, really in common. And it kept coming up, and it keeps coming up, and I've sort of become evangelist about this, is about self-compassion, right? Because the thing is that when we are sitting there fighting for our kids, fighting for our schools, fighting for our colleagues, that can be some draining stuff, right? And when we're doing that, and we're doing that with all of the societal weirdness that comes with, am I past my prime, or do I not know enough in order to do this? That just makes it that much more difficult. And so I've really come to believe that self-compassion is actually the secret sauce. And I'm not talking about like spa days, although I ain't ever gonna turn down a spa day, right? But I'm not talking about spa days or great meals or fancy clothes or fancy, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about really, really taking care of our whole selves. Make sense? Yeah? Okay. So one of the things that came up, and one of the things that I realize now, because I talk about self-compassion, I've become a real evangelist about it. I talk about self-compassion all the time, and I always say that if I were to rewrite Lightmaker's manifesto, I might put this, which is the tending your flame part of a campfire, right? I might have put this at the very beginning, because I feel like a lot of times people think of self-compassion as something you do when you get to burnout, right? Like you get to the point where you're exhausted, you're burnt out and everything else, oh, time for some self-compassion, right? And I think it's actually maybe something that you front load, right? It's the way that you get the energy to do the hard work, right? As opposed to get the energy because you're depleted. Does that make sense? Do you see the kind of a shift? So one person whose work I love, her name is Dr. Kristen Neff. She wrote a book conveniently called Self-Compassion. And she defines self-compassion as a way of emotionally recharging our batteries. Rather than becoming drained by helping others, self-compassion allows us to fill up our reserves so we have more to give when those. And I will argue to you, I'm speaking to a bunch of educators here, I speak to lawyers, I speak to doctors, I've spoken to a lot of people. I would say that for those of us who are in helping professions, this becomes not just good for our own health, but it actually is the way that we do our work better. Tell me this, I don't know if this is true. As a lawyer, like I have a code of conduct or a code of professional responsibility that I have to adhere to. Is that true for teachers as well? Yeah, there's a code. So, as a lawyer, my code of conduct says that I have to be fit to practice, right? And I suspect, I know this is true for social workers, I know this is true because I've spoken to social workers, I know this is true for doctors for sure, that this sort of fit to practice idea, right? This, self-compassion, is how you make sure you're fit to practice, we're fit to teach, okay? And we're now entering the woo-woo part of our talk, okay? So, just, if you're not a woo-woo person, just bear with me on this, all right? We'll get through it. So here's how I started thinking about this. All right, so when we think of the world, when we think of the moon waxing and waning, we think of tides rising and falling, waves and coming in and going out. When we think about our breathing, we inhale and exhale, right? Like that, nature is cyclical. That is how it works, right? There's a cycle. And how arrogant for us to think that we are above nature, right? Like we are nature. The best way we work is in cycles, all right? That's the best way we work. It means that you work and you rest, right? You go hard and you take care of yourself. And it should be a cycle. It shouldn't be a, oh my gosh. And just like when we breathe, if you think about it, when you breathe, you don't exhale and exhale and exhale and exhale until you're finally gasping for breath and then you inhale, right? You don't even think about it. You just cyclically breathe. And that's really how we should be taking care of ourselves. That's how we practice self-compassion. Is that when it's time to rest, we rest. And when it's time to go hard, we go hard. And we trust that our colleagues and everybody else, they're on different cycles. So they're going to be going hard when we rest, and we're going to go hard when they rest. And that's how the work is done. Does that make sense? Yeah? Silence again. Still grappling with it? Good, excellent. Okay, so what I'd like to talk about are ways that we practice for the last few minutes that we have together. I want to talk about ways that we practice self-compassion, okay? Because self-compassion, if you think about it, it's treating ourselves the way we would treat our best friend, okay? So I'm gonna do a little detour here because I have some time. So I'm gonna do a little detour. So let's imagine that I'm a teacher. That might be a stretch for some people, but just imagine that I'm a teacher. And I come to you, you are my friend, and I come to you with a story. So friend, as you know, it's been parent-teacher conferences right now at our school, and it's the first parent-teacher conferences of the year. And I met with this couple about their kid, and I was so excited to meet with them because I was like, your kid is such a joy. Your kid is an amazing kid. It's like having a little mini teacher in the classroom with me. They help the people who are struggling. They're always willing to help me. They always come into class with the best attitude. Their homework is perfect. They neat. I can read everything they're doing. They take criticism well, constructive. They are, and it is a joy to teach. I shouldn't tell you this. They're my favorite kid in the class. I should not tell you this. And the parents were sitting there, I'm telling you this, my friend. The parents were sitting there and they are delighted and somewhat surprised. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yes. And I'm going on, and they're like, react and tell me that they're surprised because, and they use a child's name that is not the child I was thinking of. And in fact, their child is a pain in my butt. They are so awful, this child is constantly disrupting the class. They're just awful, and actually, I was planning on telling them that I think their child should be demoted. And so when I corrected them, they were furious. Not just because I had given them some hope, but because I didn't even have the decency to know their kid's name. I feel horrible. I'm sure they're going to go to the principal. I might get fired. I'm telling you this is my friend. Okay? All right. So I've just told you that story. Shout out whatever you would say to me in response, and let me be clear, you are my friend. Okay? There's always somebody in the crowd that will go, well, you a damn fool. That's not what I'm talking about. All right? I want you to show me compassion. So what are some of the things that you would shout to me in that situation? What was that? It should happen. Yes, absolutely. That counts. Excellent. What else? What was that over here? Give yourself permission to forgive yourself. I love that. What else? It could happen to anyone. I love that. Anything else? Somebody's saying, I would share a story about something similar that happened to me, right? Absolutely. Give yourself grace. You're still a good teacher. Excellent. Now that's what I'm talking about. Y'all are some compassionate people. Thank you to those of you who really wanted to tell me I was a damn fool and did not. Okay. All right, so those are all great. Thank you for that. Thank you so much for that. Some of you might even hug me. Maybe one of you would pat me on the back, like you're going to be fine, okay? So self-compassion, what Dr. Neff says that self-compassion is about, it's about three things, all right? This is what we do for compassion, and this is what self-compassion is. When we have compassion, we do three things. We'll talk about acknowledgement. Oh my gosh, that must have been so hard. Wow, Karen, ouch, that hurt. That must have been really difficult for you. I can only imagine, right? All right? The other thing is, the second thing you do is common humanity. It could have happened to anyone, right? Of course you feel that bad. Anybody in your situation would have felt horrible. Don't beat yourself up. Give yourself grace and hit somebody else, all right? And then, the last part of self-compassion is there anything I can do to help? What can I do to help you, right? So, acknowledgement, common humanity, and what was the last one I just said? And going kindly. When we do self-compassion, we do the same thing. So when that happened to me, it didn't happen to me, but when that happened to me, I would do something like, oh my God, I can't believe I screwed up. That's hard. Okay, give myself a second. This really could have happened to anyone. Anybody who was experiencing this would feel this right now. May I be gentle? May I be careful with myself, right? And you give yourself that sort of grace. So that's a quick way to give yourself self-compassion. Does that make sense? I like to call it a self-compassion break. Look up Kristen Neff, N-E-F-F. Hang on, let me go backwards. Let me see if I can do that. Kristen Neff. If you go to her website, she talks all about it. It's really, really good. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do, again, more woo-woo stuff, but stay with me, is gratitude, the practice of a gratitude practice. I know I'm sick of hearing gratitude. I'm sick of hearing my mouth say gratitude, all right? Like, everybody's like, oh, yeah, the gratitude practice, of course, Karen. All right. I know. The problem is it works. I'm really sorry. But it works, okay? So I will tell you, I started gratitude practice when I was about 27, 28 years old. I'm 57 now. So 30 years of a gratitude practice where every single night, and I'll tell you, I started this when I was 27, I was going through a really hard time. I had just taken the concentric circles of hell, that is the bar exam. I was in the process of getting divorced, and I had just lost the job that I thought was going to be my job once I became a lawyer. And I was miserable. And I remember one night, I was at the point where I was like, why am I even here? Right? And this voice said to me, if you can think of one thing that happened today that was good, just go to sleep and deal with life in the morning. One good thing. And the first thing that came to mind, true story, was the fact that I had had a perfect boiled egg for breakfast. I had boiled it just the way I liked it, where it's sort of gooey in the yellow part and the white, right? And that's the first thing that came to mind. That was a great boiled egg. And the other part of me was like, seriously? That is the best thing in your life right now? Is a boiled egg? And I was like, I didn't say it had to be big, right? I just said I had to come up with one good thing. So I went to bed. And I will tell you, in 30 years, I have never not come up with one good thing, including, by the way, as you heard me say, when we lost everything in Harvey. All right? We lost when I tell you we lost everything. The house was gone, the cars, the clothes everything was gone in Harvey, right? We had to evacuate. It was awful. And I remember in the days that happened after Harvey, Houstonians, am I wrong? Harvey was the worst, right? It was the worst. And I remember in the days after Harvey, when we finally got back into the house, like every single day, I had something to come up with. Now the trick to this gratitude practice, it has to be specific. It can't just be, I'm grateful for my partner, or I'm grateful for my kids. Like, it has to be what happened that day. I'm grateful that my partner brought me a cup of tea today and I didn't even ask for it. That was really sweet. I'm grateful that my kid makes me laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh. What a gift that is, right? It has to be that specific. And I remember in Harvey, never once did I not come up, including one day, we're mucking out the house, right? We're throwing furniture out on the front to be collected, where everything is gone. And the strangers kept showing up. People kept showing up. Casseroles. I've never eaten so many casseroles in my life, right? People were bringing casseroles. Another friend of ours was like, I have a garage apartment. If you all need to stay in the garage apartment while you rebuild. Like every single day something happened, including this one dude who showed up, never saw him before in my life. Shows up, we're throwing stuff out on the front lawn. He shows up, he says, hey, I'm here to volunteer. Do you need any help? I'm like, yeah, thanks. Can you help us, like, take everything out, rip the drywall off, doing all this other stuff? Stayed all day long, helped us, along with a bunch of other people. At the end of the day, around 5 o'clock, he says, okay, I'm going to go. And I said, oh, I appreciate that. He goes, yeah, I would stay longer, but I got to get back to New Orleans, which is about a 5-hour drive from Houston. I was like, why do you have to go back to New Orleans? Like, just, can you not stay in a hotel? He's like, well, all the hotels are full, because everybody's lost their home. And I was like, so wait, did you drive here from New Orleans this morning? He said, yeah. He got up at like 5 in the morning, drove till 10, showed up at a neighborhood, came to our house, helped us clear up. It was now 5 and he was driving back, 10 hours in the car. And I said, are you insane? Like, why did you do this? And he said, well, you Houstonians were so great to us during Hurricane Katrina, I could not do it. I get emotional every time I think about this because I will tell you I never knew that man's name. I have no idea where he is. Things like that were happening every single day. And the thing about it is now when I look back, like my overwhelming feeling around Harvey is gratitude. It's not loss. It's not grief, weirdly. Weirdly, right? It's that kind of thing. And the trick about the gratitude practice is it only works if you start doing it when things are really good, so that it becomes second nature when things are bad, right? Because if we weren't constantly focusing on the good stuff, I could have sat here up here and gone, we lost everything, we had to rebuild everything, it cost us so much money, and I could have done that. But it's not. It's genuinely not what I do. So please, take stock every single day. Sometimes it'll be nothing, you have a great boiled egg. Sometimes it'll be you got standing on a stage in front of amazing people who are making the world better for kids, right? Like, there's always going to be something. Okay. The second thing I want to talk about is about community. Dr. Vivek Murthy, who is the current Surgeon General of the United States, he's written this great book called Together, and he talks about how loneliness is an epidemic in the United States, and what you need to do is really, really cultivate community. And I feel like this is actually harder now than maybe it was years ago, because it's so easy to create fake community with social media, right? You feel like you're connected to people, or email or stuff like that. And so he actually talks about, like, there's a few ways that we should all be cultivating community in our lives, all right? The first one is to spend 15 minutes with somebody every single day. Somebody you care about every single day. It doesn't have to be a different person every day, so don't panic, right? It can be your partner, it can be your coworkers or something, but really, really spend some time with that person. The second thing is do so without distraction. Put the phones away, right? All right? The third one is, I'm trying to remember, there's 4 things. The third one is, cultivate a practice of solitude, right? To be able to spend some time with yourself and connecting with yourself helps you connect better with other people, right? So whether that's meditation, whether that's a walk in the woods, whether that's staring into a candle for 10 minutes, whatever it is. And then the final one is to work with meaning and purpose. Do work with meaning and purpose, whether it's volunteering or you're doing the work that you all do right now. And those are the ways that you cultivate community. With me? Yeah. All right. Next one is celebration and play. And here's the thing. Yeah, I've got a couple of copies over here. This is huge, and I think we forget about this all the time. And I think we specifically forget about this when we're in jobs where it's about taking care of other people, right? Because when we're sitting and focused on other people and we're focused on shooting down problems, it can be very hard when something really good happens to go, wow, this is amazing, let's celebrate that. We're like, great, cool, that happened, let's move on to the next problem, right? And so what I would suggest, both personally and professionally, is that you work in a cadence of celebration or play in your workplaces and in your life. Some examples, a friend of mine runs, actually the friend who had the garage apartment we could stay in after Harvey, she has her own company, and every Friday they have Champagne Fridays, where they bring bubbly in for the last half hour of work, and they celebrate any good thing that happened with people during the week, right? Just a little ritual before they go off to work. So that's one thing you can do. One thing, just personally, I will tell you, it's a humble brag, but it is true. Radiant Rebellion won a really lovely award, and it's an Anonymous Award. It's an award for people who are giving back, and so it meant a lot to me. And I got the news from my publisher that it had won, and I was like, that's awesome, but I was in the middle of writing the book that's coming out next year. So I was like, that's great. And I went back to work, and I was like, oh my God, physician, heal thyself. So I called my husband, I was like, hey, guess what? My book won an award. He was like, that's great. And I'm like, you're taking me out to dinner. Right? Yay, you! I'm like, this is, right? But really sort of making a point of really celebrating the wins, like really making that point. And bonus, that gives you something to add to your little gratitude thing before you go to bed at night, right? Which is really, really cool. And of course, play. This is a friend of mine who's a play coach. The secret to living a long life, give yourself permission to play every day. I will tell you my play is in the form of a hula hoop. No, I will not demonstrate. Not only will you increase your chances of living longer, you'll experience a more fulfilling, fun-filled, fantastical ride of a life. Okay, so I've got 6 minutes left. And I'm going to give you a couple of tools, very easy tools, for you to embed self-compassion in your lives, okay? You ready? And I'm also going to tell you that this next slide that I'm going to show you has is the thing that in the books, most people come to me and go, because it actually is mentioned in both books, kind of go, this was the most helpful thing that you've ever shared. So get your phones up, get ready to snap this next line, okay? All right. So, I'm going to tell you right now the two things. I could get up here and tell you, okay, everybody, after you leave the conference today, I want you every day to work out an hour. I need you to meditate for half an hour. I need you to call your friends and make sure that you spend some time with them every single day. I need you to do meaningful work, volunteer if you can, and I want you to get 8 hours of sleep, right? Like, you would look at me like, please get off the stage. Like, why are you talking to us, right? So here's the thing about self-compassion. Remember I said it was something that is an ebb and a flow, okay? So this is one thing that I do literally every single day. You guys make to-do lists? Are you all in to-do lists? Okay. When I make my to-do list, after I've written down all the responsibilities, I ask myself these 3 questions, okay? How can I be healthy today? How can I feel connected today? How can I be purposeful today? Healthy, connected, and purposeful, okay? Now, the reason I like these is they are very open-ended questions. So let's take healthy. How can I be healthy today? Maybe that means I'm going to spend an hour at the gym. Maybe there's no way I'm getting to the gym today. But so if that's happening, okay, how can I feel healthy? I'm going to drink extra water all day long. And it goes on my to-do list. All right? I'm going to take a nap. I got 20 minutes, I'm going to take a nap. That goes on the to-do list. I'm going to go to bed early tonight. That goes, whatever it is. It can be that simple, but just doing that thing. How can I feel purposeful today? Well, you all do purposeful work, so that's probably an easy one for you to fill up. But if not, it could be, you know what? I hear there's this issue about, I don't know, the environment, right? The whales are dying. And I don't really understand much about that. I'm going to carve 20 minutes to just do some research about it. Or I'm going to give to a cause that's really important to me, or whatever. Sometimes it's big, sometimes it's small. But just the checking in of how can I do these 3 things every single day, that's the self-compassion, right? And put it on your list. Does that make sense? Sound doable? Okay, great. The next one, I'm going to tell you, it looks very, very scary. Just stay with me. It's not, I promise, all right? So this is the thing you do at the beginning of every day. I will tell you, this is something I do pretty much every day. This next thing I'm going to show you, I'm not that great at. But I'll give it to you just in case this might be your thing. So, if you think about your health, remember I said, oh, you need to take care of your spirit, your physical, you do all those other things, blah, 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 get all that done every single day. Don't do that every single day, you'll drive yourself bananas. But this is a tracker where you can look at trends over time. Okay? So if you do it in a calendar, think about the 5 things about your whole life. Spirituality, physical. Spirituality can be everything from going to a religious service, or it could be the walk in nature, it could be meditation, it could be whatever spiritual means for you, right? Physical, intellectual, how are you keeping your mind active? Relational, that's that community thing, and emotional. And at the end of every day, just look back on your day and go, did I do any of these things today? And put a tick by them, all right? Just put a tick by them. No judgment. Did I do it? Did I not do it? And the trick is that after 2 weeks or a month, you look back and go, wow, I have not been really great about keeping up with my friends. Maybe it's time for me to schedule a coffee date with a friend of mine, right? So the point isn't to fill it every single day. I mean, more power to you if you can. I can't. But it's to be able to check in with yourself. That's the self-compassion. Where do I need to focus going forward? Where do I need to get focused? Make sense? All right. I got 90 seconds left. I'm doing so great on this. And I'm on my last slide. So, I'm just going to leave you with this. All right? As you go forth and do all of your very, very hard work, right? Caring for other people's children, right? And educating other people's children, and caring for each other, and caring for your colleagues in the face of all the crazy that this world, and by the way, does not seem to be stopping, right? All the crazy is doing this. I just want to share this one thought, that in a world that tends to capitalize on despair and disillusionment, hello algorithms, social media, use things, joy is the ultimate act of resistance. So protect it at all costs. Your joy is important.